for the tour of haunted Three Rivers and the stories that you heard. But very likely, if there's no reason for concern, there's a small chance that a ghost, a spirit, or a beast of the deep will just let you know that there are ghosts. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been Ron Zombie, your host.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome aboard the Gateway Clipper Fleet Three Rivers Queen for Haunted Three Rivers. I'll be your host, Ron Zombie. Thank you for getting that. And tonight, we'll be exploring the depths of Pittsburgh's darker Three Rivers. Well, just so you're aware, in case you missed it by coming all the way to the top deck when you first arrive, on the very first deck, you'll find a tarot card reader. She'll be more than happy to read your fortune free of charge. It may just cost you your soul. Also, on the first and second deck, if you feel you need for a bit of liquid courage, with well-stocked bars available, a wide variety of wine and beer and mixed drinks. We would certainly recommend the Poison Apple, which has alcohol, and the Zombie Blood, which does not. Now, before we begin, I always like to poll my audience. And since I can't see everyone on all three decks as far as you know, I'm going to pose the question to you in this fashion. If you believe in the possibility of the paranormal, if you think there's a chance that spirits could walk among us, please signify by saying, "Ah!" That is wise. For as Shakespeare famously wrote, there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Pittsburgh is rich in its history and heritage, but like many picture postcard towns, if you scratch the surface, the seedy underbelly can be exposed. And these are the types of places we'll be visiting and tales that we'll be sharing on Haunted Pittsburgh. If indeed spirits do walk among us, it's believed to be for one of three main reasons. The first is the spirit simply doesn't realize that it's died, either due to some traumatic experience which caused the death, or perhaps in life in a very repetitive, difficult, or menial task that it did over and over and over again, and simply continues to repeat that task throughout eternity. Second type of spirit is one that fears what might lie beyond. It's more comfortable in its earthly surroundings and therefore chooses to walk among us. And the third type of spirit is one that feels that it was somehow wronged in its earthly existence and therefore cannot rest in peace until it has leveled out some type of justice or vengeance. As we begin our journey on the Monongahela River, I encourage you to turn your gaze to the right-hand side of the boat and enjoy the view of the original historic train station built back in 1901, which now houses the Grand Concourse Restaurant. The Grand Concourse is an outstanding place to visit if you want outstanding cuisine, terrific service, or experience some paranormal activity or two. Numerous tales have taken place in the Grand Concourse. Stories such as utensils floating through the air, dishes inexplicably crashing to the floor, scraping noises coming from inside the walls. The most unsettling which took place in 2004, when the entire ballroom witnessed an unearthly orb emanate from the floor and raise to the vaulted ceilings until it disappeared. A traumatic experience for those with the misfortune to have experienced it. Look just beyond the old train station, you can see the brightly lit Monongahela Incline, the long angled railroad track that appears to go up and down the side of Mount Washington. Monongahela Incline is the nation's oldest continually operating funicular incline and one of Pittsburgh's staple attractions. If you've had a chance to take a ride on the incline, I hope you've enjoyed the experience. But not everybody did. When it first debuted in 1870, the incline features scenic outdoor seating. But safety equipment such as handrails and seat belts were not included. And for this reason that numerous souls managed to find a much more direct path to the base of Mount Washington. Those that managed to survive the fall would become crushed by an oncoming train. And for this reason that it's believed that many spirits inhabit the Monongahela Incline. There have been many reports of strange, unearthly phenomena, not the least of which took place in 2013, when a Port Authority employee was working by himself late at night when he felt nature's call and proceeded to the basement level to the restroom. It's then he could hear the very distinct, deliberate sounds of footsteps coming down the stairs when he knew that he was alone. He immediately exited the restroom and felt a strange, ominous presence right nearby while there was nobody there. He did what any brave Pittsburgher would do, made a mad dash to the top floor, vowed never to return. His co-workers teased him. They believed none of this silly stories about ghosts in the basement. One particular employee was delighted in giving him a particularly hard time until he himself was working the night shift at 4:30 a.m. when he received a phone call on his cell phone, which might not seem particularly scary, except the phone call was coming from the inside of the incline when he knew he was alone. So I do hope you enjoy a ride on the incline when you get an opportunity to take one. Just be cautious of any freeloading spirits that may be along for the ride. As we make our turn and head toward the point along the Monongahela River to the right-hand side, we're going to get a very brief glimpse of another site of mysterious hauntings, the former Allegheny County Prison. As we make our way just past the Grant Building, which has the Huntington logo and the blinking beacon at the top of it, we'll get a glimpse of the Gothic structure known as the former Allegheny County Prison. It is brightly lit with LED lights on the outside and well within what appears to be a belfry. How could it not be haunted just the way it looks? Although we know that's not how it works. The prison was the site of 58 total hangings, the last of which occurred in 1911. And those are just the state-mandated deaths and don't include the numerous suicides, murders, and other mysterious passings. It's believed that this is one of the most haunted structures in Pittsburgh. Numerous stories, both historic and strange, have been told, many of which have captured national headlines. One such tale involves love, betrayal, and murder most foul. A pair of brothers, Edward and Jack Biddle, arrived in Pittsburgh at the early part of the turn of the century. They immediately became known as the Chloroform Gang, as they used chloroform soaked rags to knock out their victims before robbing them blind. The Biddle brothers began to case the home of a wealthy grocer who lived atop Mount Washington, which is now over to the left-hand side of the boat. They watched his pattern for many days and decided to break in when they were certain that the home was empty. Imagine their surprise when the wealthy grocer emerged from his bedroom bearing a shotgun. But the Biddle brothers were very clever. They tricked and overpowered the grocer and turned the shotgun on him. They tried to make their escape, but the Pittsburgh police were in hot pursuit. They captured the Biddle brothers, but not before losing one of their own. The Biddle brothers were hauled to the Allegheny County Prison, where they were tried, convicted, and sentenced to hang for the murders. Enter one Kate Soffel, the young bride of the prison warden. Kate would routinely visit the prisoners, carrying Bibles, hoping to set them on the right path. Even visiting death row, feeling that if she couldn't save their lives, perhaps she could save their souls. It's here that the story becomes a bit fuzzy. It's unclear if the love-starved Kate felt hopelessly in love with the charming Ed Biddle, or her naivety caused her to believe their sordid tale that they were innocent victims and wrongfully accused. Whatever the reason, Kate began to smuggle in tools and weapons into the jail. On January 17th of 1902, the Biddle boys created a ruse, overpowered and severely injured several guards, and made their escape. Kate met them outside, romantically enough, in a horse-drawn sleigh, hoping to escape to Canada. They hadn't gotten very far, however. In only 2 days' time, the police tracked them down, and a gunfight ensued. Both Biddle boys were mortally wounded. Kate also suffered a gunshot wound, but it was self-inflicted. She survived, however, and on his deathbed, Ed Biddle summoned a priest, begged for Kate to be spared, tried to convince him that she was simply a naive and innocent victim of their sordid tale. Still, Kate served 2 years for her part in the crime. Of course, her former husband wanted nothing to do with her. She reverted to her maiden name of Catherine Miller, tried to lead a peaceful life until she died in 1909 of typhoid fever. It's believed that the spirit of Kate Soffel returned to the scene of the crime. Back in the early days, the warden's home was inside the prison. Since converted to offices, numerous employees have reported hearing papers shuffling in file cabinets, the silent light click of high heels walking through the hallways, and the soft breath of a young woman on the back of their necks, causing the hackles to raise. That's why this is believed that the former Allegheny County Prison is now the eternal damnation of the spirit of Kate Softly. And now, ladies and gentlemen, as we proceed on the Monongahela River, let me share with you another tale of the Monongahela River, deep and dark as it is. Have you ever observed the diligent deck crew working about the riverboat, meticulously inspecting every nook and cranny, even beneath the hull? Although this latter exercise is not quite common. As the veil begins to fray between the world outside and what lies beyond, the river's turn is dark as night itself. Our beloved boat takes on an eerie transformation, and such precautions become necessary. Allow me to transport you to a night much like tonight. Here on this very boat, in the same seats that you now occupy. Picture a group of unsuspecting passengers, joyful in anticipation of a leisurely one-hour sightseeing cruise, about to embark on a journey that would instead etch terror into their very souls. Perhaps, my dear passengers, we may witness a replay of that chilly night. As the sun gracefully descended below the horizon, casting its warm hues on the waters of the Monongahela River, our riverboat glided with an almost supernatural grace. Night fell, and the city of Pittsburgh revealed its magnificent skyline, aglow with a breathtaking display of lights. The skyline itself whispered tales of a city rich in history and heritage of steel and lore. As the boat sailed on, the captain, with a voice strong and authoritative, would point out familiar landmarks along across the city. He spoke of Pittsburgh's storied past, a city that had once stood as an industrial titan, forged from the fiery furnaces of steel mills that lined these very shores. The very air you breathe, ladies and gentlemen, carries echoes of that industrial might. However, in the midst of this tranquil scene, a palpable sense of foreboding began to arise. The boat's lights began to flicker, and the once assured voice of the captain began to crackle ominously through the microphone until it fell silent altogether. The once jovial atmosphere aboard the vessel gave way to an unsettling silence. It was then, under the shroud of darkness, that the eerie sound of heavy, waterlogged footsteps echoed through the vessel. Slowly but relentlessly, these footsteps ascended toward the boat's pilot house. Passengers exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier excitement now replaced by a mounting sense of dread. Suddenly, a blinding burst of light erupted from within the pilot house, illuminating a sight that sent shivers down the spines of all on board. There in the captain's domain stood an apparition, a captain covered from head to toe in filth and mud and grime, his eyes filled with a menacing glare. The passengers were thrust into a realm of the unexplained, where supernatural defied all reason. As the light cut through the darkness, it unveiled a sinister trail, a path of footsteps throughout the decks, on the sides of the vessel, and even beneath the hull. And so, as we navigate these haunted waters, let us carry with us the harrowing legend of the Mon River Mud Captain, which serves as a stark reminder that on Halloween nights such as these, the ordinary can swiftly give way to the bizarre and the unnatural. The boundaries between the living and the dead and the spectral may blur. As we continue our voyage on the enigmatic Haunted Queen, stay vigilant, my dear passengers, For who can say what other worldly encounters may yet lurk beneath the surface on this eerie night? As the lights of the city dim and the darkness overtakes the light, remember the history that was within its steel embrace, a history that on nights like this may reach out from the depths and grasp those unwilling or not able to understand the nature of what takes place. As we cross the Ohio River and venture onto the Allegheny River, you may be asking yourself, what could possibly lurk beneath these waters? Has anybody ever heard of the Monongahela Monster? Could there be a terrifying, salivating, angry beast lurking beneath these waves? Or perhaps is it a simple case of mistaken identity? Allow me to explain. Tales of a beast lurking in the Pittsburgh rivers date back to the days even before the first European settlers arrived. The Native Americans shared stories of the Ogawa, known to drag deer down to the riverbanks and devour them in minutes. This monster was capable of swallowing animals and small children whole. According to the lore, the Ogawa was 20 feet in length, believed to weigh 500 pounds. Its description varies, but for the most part it is said to resemble a giant, monstrous turtle with a terrifying beak that can slice a man in two, and a long, powerful tail that could whip any animal off of its feet. So, did the Ogawa exist? And what connection might it have to the Monongahela Monster? Around 1852, a sailing vessel known as the Monongahela hailed from Massachusetts and would play center stage in a tale that would eventually make world headlines. Word came to the mainland in the form of a letter supposedly written from a crew member aboard the vessel. It detailed a long and epic battle near the Aleutian Islands between the crew of the Monongahela and a serpent-like creature that measured 100 feet long, 50 feet around, and the head of an alligator, and endless rows of teeth like a shark. For days, the crew of the Monongahela battled this beast until it was believed that the Monongahela was victorious. The account was immediately published in local newspapers, and approximately 100 years later, the story resurfaced around the entire world. Nobody knows if any part of the story is actually true. The wreckage of the Monongahela was discovered near the Aleutian Islands in 1855. There were no survivors. Some say that the letter was a hoax, while others think that similar beasts of the deep may yet be among us. As for the Pittsburgh connection, at some point the tales seem to have gotten twisted together, and they changed the appearance of the Ogawa to more resemble the monster caught by the sailing vessel the Monongahela, and thus the Monongahela Monster was born. As for the Ogawa, there may be some actual truth to the myth of this monstrous creature. Alligator snapping turtles exist, and while they prefer the southern climates, they have been known to venture this way. The Ogawa's description closely matches the alligator snapping turtle, which can live to be 250 years old and weigh up to 250 pounds. These are the ones that have been sighted, but it is believed that it could live to 300 to 500 years and would continue to grow that entire time. While there's more than likely nothing to be concerned about, just be cautious the next time you're at the river's edge, as the Ogawa may be lurking. And now, as we continue along the Allegheny River, another tale, so twisted and unbelievable, yet so simple in many ways. A young woman, you see, found herself aboard a familiar sightseeing cruise along, very similar to what you're doing today. A place that she had frequented in her youth. You see, she had returned home after pursuing a long career, drawn back with a longing of the nostalgic comfort of these sunset voyages. As the boat pushed away from the banks of the river, the warm hues of the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. The woman, filled with memories of her childhood, checked the time, realizing that in just a short while, she would reach her beloved North Shore, where she could visit her childhood home once again. However, as the boat glided further along the river's gentle current, an eerie stillness descended. It was as though it slowed to a stop, positioned beneath an old, historic bridge, one that she remembered well from her youth. But something was different this time. A thick, swirling fog enveloped the river, casting an otherworldly atmosphere upon the scene. The girl peered ahead, expecting to see the familiar dock, but all that greeted her was a shroud of impenetrable darkness. Suddenly, a peculiar sound like nails scraping on glass sent shivers down her spine. She turned, heart pounding, and was met with an empty space where the bridge abutment should have been. She was alone on the boat. Straining her eyes in the eerie gloom, she saw a shadowy figure slowly materializing before her. The form wavered as it struggled to solidify. She couldn't be sure if she saw what was real. And then a face emerged from the darkness, looming larger in front of her, with eyes were outlined in black and beads hung among braided hair. Fear gripped her as she struggled to retrieve her phone. She didn't necessarily want a photo of this horrifying image, but she felt if she survived the encounter, she needed to have proof or nobody would believe her. Her trembling fingers captured the photo, preserving the unnatural grimace of the menacing figure before her. The shuddering sound echoed, and the ghastly image of a temporary imprint on her phone. The ghostly face, now with a wide open and horrifying mouth, unleashed a wild, piercing scream that filled the air. The sound was an unholy cacophony, full of ancient secrets and mysterious lore.
Cacophony. I like it.
Abruptly, the boat roared back to life, resuming its journey to the darkened river. It left the ghostly bridge and its enigmatic resident behind. The woman, shaken to the core, leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes, striving to steady her racing heart. Eventually, the boat returned to the familiar shore, and the girl disembarked. She found herself back at her childhood home, surrounded by the comforts of her past. But the memory of the ghost under the bridge haunted her, a reminder that the past and the present often converge in the most unexpected and bizarre of ways. Sometime later, the young woman once again couldn't resist the allure of another sunset cruise. Returning to the site of so many happy memories, she once again hopped aboard to recapture that feeling. But as the boat pushed away from the dock, she couldn't help but wonder if the ghost under the bridge would make another eerie appearance. As the river carried her away on that tranquil evening, she knew that the mysteries of the river's edge were far from over. They lingered in the twilight, waiting to be unveiled, leaving her with an enduring connection to the past and the dark presence that dwelled beneath the bridge. And now, ladies and gentlemen, you might be surprised to learn that the average depth of the rivers here, it's only 16.5 feet. And they're only that deep due to the extensive locks and dams that have been installed throughout all three rivers. So you might be asking yourself, well, Ron, zombie, what could you possibly lose in 16.5 feet depth of water? Well, cars, boats, bodies. Would you believe? A B-25 bomber.
See, I told you.
True story. On January 31st of 1956, Major William Dodson was piloting his B-25 Mitchell bomber over the Pittsburgh area on a routine training flight. With the engine failing and having no visible airstrip with which to land, Major Dodson had to make a hasty decision. He made a splashdown, wheels-up landing in the Monongahela River, where we first began our journey a few miles upstream near what is now known as the Homestead Grays Bridge. Initially, all 6 crew members survived the crash, but as the bomber sank further into the 34-degree water, sadly 2 crew members did not survive. But their bodies were not recovered for months after the accident. Within hours, the Coast Guard cutter Forsythia was on the scene, and its anchor snagged in the wing of the sunken bomber, but the line slipped and the bomber sank further into its watery grave, never to be seen again. For 2 weeks, the Army Corps of Engineers and the Coast Guard searched for the missing bomber, to no avail. So how do you lose a 15-foot high B-25 bomber in less than 20 feet depth of water? To this day remains one of Pittsburgh's greatest unsolved mysteries. As we clear the 4th oldest bridge in the city, the Fort Wayne Railroad Bridge, another well-known tourist destination comes into view on the right-hand side, the historic Strip District. If you are from out of town, would certainly recommend visiting if you want the full Pittsburgh experience. Also here is the brightly lit Heinz History Center, a great resource for those of you interested in learning all things Pittsburgh. Or perhaps you'd like to experience something a little more otherworldly. Well, then the site of the Heinz History Center is another viable candidate. The site of what is now the Heinz History Center was also the site of one of the city's deadliest tragedies. It was the evening of February 9th of 1898 at the Chautauqua Lake Ice Company, which once stood on the site where the Heinz History Center is today. Employees on the 3rd floor were startled when they heard a loud noise, and almost instantly the entire room was raging with fire. They ran towards the exit, but it was already too late. Flames engulfed their path. The only chance of survival were the windows, which sat 50 feet above the ground. They were forced to cling to the window ledge in the hopes that the fire department would arrive in time. The heat was so intense that the men suffered severe burns to their hands and faces. But they were the lucky ones. Those on the 4th floor were trapped with no means of escape. The ice house was heavily insulated, you see, which made firefighting efforts nearly impossible. The fire raged fast and hard as the fortress-like structure burned from the inside out. Not only was this building an ice house, which required ammonia to keep things cold, there was also a storage facility for whiskey, both liquids highly flammable. A short time into the fire, the entire building exploded, shooting flames over 100 feet into the air. Concrete, steel pipes, and debris went flying. The walls of the building started to collapse and trapped people underneath. The owner of the company, William Scott, watched in horror from a nearby rooftop. It would later learn that his oldest son, William Scott Jr., would perish in the flames, and his younger son, John Scott, was crushed under debris. In total, 18 people were declared dead, dozens more injured, and many others missing and presumed dead. The structure of the Heinz History Center is an almost exact replica of the original ice house that once stood on that site. It has been said that the spirits of the dead can inhabit the land upon which their traumatic death occurred, even if the structure is no longer there. It is even possible that anything built on that land could be haunted by these self-same spirits. This appears to be the case with the Heinz History Center. Phantom footsteps going down the halls, doors opening and closing on their own, apparitions that disappear when you approach, phantom voices that call out your name. These are just some of the ongoing and unexplained phenomena that have taken place at the Heinz History Center. the staff does not seem particularly concerned. In fact, many consider these spirits to be permanent relics of the museum. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, I do encourage you to stretch your legs if you like and move about the boat. If you get a chance, you can maybe catch your breath and let your heart stop beating a little bit too much. And a fiendly reminder that you can venture to the first deck where our tarot card reader is anxiously awaiting your arrival for a free peek into your future, if you dare. The first and second deck, we have our well-stocked concession stand and cocktail bar, where you will find an abundance of food and drink from which to choose. We'd certainly recommend our two frightfully fun beverages, the Poison Apple, which has alcohol, and Zombie Blood, which does not. I am told that if you purchase spirits there, it could raise some spirits here. Also be on the lookout for our green-shirted and caped photography crew, which has full color print of the onboard photos taken when you first arrived. If you love that photo, you may purchase it and take it home with you as a treasured memento of today's trip. The photographers did not capture your soul at all, and that you have to purchase it in order to get it back. As we slowly make our way back to the point along the Allegheny River, over to the right-hand side is an area known as the North Shore and the North Side. And it is a hotbed of haunted activity and lore. It centers around a place known only as the Dark Place. It's difficult to imagine why. Would you think an area the Native Americans called the Dark Place would be pleasant and fun? Native Americans viewed the wilderness as a spiritual and mystical place, but they also respected and feared the physical dangers as well as the unknown. There was one particular area that they were said to fear most of all. This was known as the Dark Place. The landscape that you see before you, stretching all the way to Acrisure Stadium, looks vastly different in the 1700s and early 1800s. A series of islands line the shore. The largest of these islands was known as the Smoky Island. It later became known as Killbuck Island. But you are asking yourself, why was it referred to as Smoky Island? Well, during the French and Indian War, the Native Americans would use Smoky Island as a place of torture for their European captives. And many were burned at the stake, which caused a great deal of smoke, as well as a horrendous stench. This is also believed to be the final quote-unquote resting place for many of General George Braddock's men, which were surprised and hopelessly slaughtered in the Battle of the French and Indian War in 1755. Legend states that some of the tribes avoided crossing this area altogether because the land was tainted by the spirits of their dead enemies. By 1850, the backwaters were filled in. The islands became an extension of the North Shore area, and it appears that the spirits of the tortured may have also wandered off the island. As we journey down the Allegheny River, I'd like to share some of the ghostly tales and locations situated around just a short distance from the Dark Place. Ever since the days of Smoky Island, the area of the North Side has more than its fair share of ghostly tales, some more credible than others. But some haunted tales are so powerful that even when there is overwhelming evidence to refute the claims, we still allow the myth to overcome the reason. One such example of this is a location known as 1129 Ridge Avenue, also known as the Congolier House. 1129 Ridge Avenue was recorded not as the most haunted site in Pittsburgh, not as the most haunted site in Pennsylvania. 1129 Ridge Avenue was the most haunted site in America. The events surrounding 1129 Ridge Avenue are dark and ominous to say the least. Decapitations, strange and inhuman experiments, murders. This location had it all. Due to the myriad of ghastly tales emanating from this location, people began to investigate the source of these strange occurrences. But did they discover a spirit or a dark evil? No. Instead, what the investigators uncovered was that the most haunted site in America wasn't haunted at all. A classic case of folklore and myth being far too wonderful to be dismissed. It doesn't matter that almost all aspects of the stories can be exposed as fake. In the 21st century, we're used to fake news. And this is why it's believed that the stories of 1129 Ridge Avenue will continue to be told for generations to come. If you ever find yourself in the student union of the Allegheny County Community College on the north side, don't be surprised if you hear the mischievous laughter of a child or feel something tug at you when there's nobody there. In 1898, Alexander Byers had amassed a fortune in iron piping and built a home on Millionaire's Row on Ridge Avenue. The home was built to accommodate he and his wife as well as his daughter Maud and her family. It was a typical day at the Byers mansion. The house was bustling with activity. Children running about, maids and other servants tending to their chores. Mary Ann, the nanny of the youngest of the Byers' grandchildren, could not find her young charge anywhere. She called out, and no response, until suddenly she heard a sickening thud, followed by a loud scream. Mary Ann ran towards the direction of the maid's gaze. The door of the dumbwaiter shaft was wide open. Mary Ann gasped, "No, it can't be." Alexander Byers' 4-year-old granddaughter fell down the open shaft and died. It was speculated somebody may have simply allowed her to play the dumbwaiter before. When she opened the door, expecting to find the car there, she fell to her death. A horrible, senseless, and tragic accident. But the next day, Mary Ann hung herself. It said that she left a note behind that read, "Please don't blame me." Some think she did it out of guilt. Others say a deep, sorrowful sadness. Some believe that she felt a continuing sense of duty to protect the child and could no longer do that from this side. Sightings of the nanny walking about with a child persist to this day. The college says that they are happy to have them there. The ghosts give no indication of being evil or malevolent, but instead of a very playful nature. However, there are security guards that refuse to work the night shift. The Byers family does indeed seem to be cursed. This is a true story of Eben Byers, so you're welcome to look it up on your phones. Eben Byers was the son of Alexander Byers. Eben was a handsome and charming man, an all-star athlete and very successful. But after an arm injury, he was in constant pain and found himself in persistent and nagging pain. Never fear, the new miracle cure is here. Doctor prescribed Radithor, guaranteed to cure, well, just about anything. Eben couldn't get enough of this stuff. He drank upwards of 3 bottles a day, and he wasn't even greedy about it. He purchased cases of the elixir to share with his friends. What a guy. After approximately 7 years of consuming the liquid, Eben finally stopped. Was he cured of his injuries? Well, his arm did feel a lot better, but Eben was now suffering from bone loss, abscesses in his brain, as well as holes forming in his skull. Eben even had to have an operation to remove most of his upper and lower jaw. You see, the miracle cure was no miracle at all. Radithor contains radium, and Eben consumed more than 3 times the acute lethal radiation dosage. When he died in 1932, He was buried in the Allegheny Cemetery in a lead-lined coffin. As for his friends, at least one of them died from the elixir as well. The inventor of Radithor went on to invent several other radium-based products. If you might be wondering why doctors would prescribe something so deadly to their patients, perhaps a 17% kickback would explain why. Sound familiar? And now, ladies and gentlemen, as we exit the Allegheny River and sail briefly along the Ohio River, I can share another twisted tale of the river's depths. Beneath the surface of this winding river, near a forgotten bend, a malevolent entity lies in wait, known by many names, but to those who sail these waters, she is known as the dreaded River Temptress. With a lithe form and skin pale as death itself, her eyes are black as the river waters below us. Beware the River Temptress, for she is a witch of the waves, a ripper under the river currents, capable of summoning storms and ensnaring unwary souls. From the depths of the waters, the River Temptress watches and waits for the opportune moment to strike. She delights in capturing riverboat passengers, weaving them into her sinister embrace, and enslaving them within her saffron cave, buried beneath the rivers in the bedrock. Sometimes the River Temptress bides her time until the calm settles after a turbulent storm, luring the riverboat crew to a false sense of security. But when they least expect it, she surges forth from the murky waters, unleashing her wrath with the force of an all-consuming storm, engulfing the riverboat without a trace. Only one warning precedes her malevolence. Amidst the gentle flow of the river waters, listen closely to her haunting melody. If you hear this haunting call, flee immediately, for the River Temptress is near. But if you find yourself entangled by her hollow gaze, pray for mercy. for she knows no kindness. Once enraptured by the river temptress, she summons a deadly whirlpool, dragging the riverboat into the darkened depths. Her long, pale arms embrace the vessel, pulling it into the heart of the river, where she feasts upon her victims. Yet it is not just passengers who fall under her thrall. The river temptress is drawn to the crew members and the captains as well. When her song fills the air, she targets them, leaving the boat still, quiet, and stick as death, vulnerable to her attack. Once the crew succumbs to her enchantment, the boat is brought to a halt under the ghostly lights of an old bridge. The river's silence amplifies the tension as the vessel awaits at the mercy of the river temptress. The river temptress song grows stronger, its melody weaving through the air, carrying with it a sense of foreboding. And then, just as the legend foretells, a figure emerges from the depths, her form shimmering with an otherworldly light. The river temptress stands before you, her eyes fixed upon the boat, her presence both haunting and mesmerizing. As we navigate through these waters of the river temptress, let us be vigilant and heed the warnings of those who have encountered her eerie allure. The river holds its secrets close, ladies and gentlemen, and the spirits of the dead may still be entangled in its murky depths. So let us navigate with caution, for the river temptress's siren song continues to echo throughout the mist. With a steadfast resolve, we shall forge ahead, respecting the river's power and its many mysteries. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as we continue our voyage, another chapter from The Truth is Far More Terrifying Than Fiction. I submit for your approval the name of one Martha Grinder. Mrs. Grinder was a lovely woman who resided in the South Side with her husband and child. She was always so helpful and friendly to her neighbors and loved ones. If someone became ill, she was the first to be by their side. She would cook their meals, stay with them, and do whatever she could to make them feel more comfortable. Unfortunately for them, the lovely meals that Mrs. Grinder prepared contained a variety of poisons. She never poisoned anyone enough to kill them right away. Oh no! She had to draw it out over time and observe the excruciating anguish that would befall her victims. While it is believed that Martha Grinder may be one of the nation's very first serial killers, she was only tried for 2 of the murders. During her trial, Martha told the jury, "I loved to see death in all of its forms and phases, and left no opportunity to gratify my taste for such sights. Would I had my own way? Probably I would have done more." On January 19th of 1866, Martha Grinder was led to the gallows set up in the old Allegheny County Prison. But what should have been a quick and painful death was anything but. Due to an error related to the rope length and the positioning, instead of a painless snap of the neck, It turned into a long and agonizing scene that went on for several minutes. Ironic, is it not, that Martha Grinder became the victim of a similar, extended, excruciating death that she received so much pleasure in watching on the faces of her victims. Among those that Martha suspected of poisoning include her housemaid, several neighbors, her brother-in-law, her own child, and many others. So the next time, ladies and gentlemen, your neighbor brings you over some fresh-baked cookies, perhaps you should think twice before accepting. And now, ladies and gentlemen, as we make our way to the Gateway Clipper docks and prepare for the end of our journey, I have one final ghostly tale. As we pass under the Fort Pitt Bridge, we'll soon be sailing by the brightly lit Highmark Stadium, home of the Pittsburgh Riverhounds, as well as many different sporting events and musical concerts. Highmark Stadium is an example of one of the many, many renaissances enjoyed by the city of Pittsburgh. Because at one time, the site that is now Highmark Stadium was one of Andrew Carnegie's many steel mills. Pittsburgh is known as the Steel City. The industry that forged this community and helped to build America was a driving force in its growth. Steel mills lined the rivers and employed tens of thousands of people and supported hundreds of thousands more. And while the molten steel was considered to be the lifeblood of the city, it was also the source of many sorrows. The life of a steelworker was hard. There were very few safety measures in place, and the working conditions were dangerous, to say the least. Many men were left disfigured from injuries, and many more died. Each steel mill has its own macabre collection of tales, each as horrifying as the last. The site that is now Highmark Stadium is no exception. Over 40 men perished while working on this site, some of them falling into a ladle of molten steel. Their bodies immediately liquefied. No burial for these men. There was nothing left to bury. After the steel, it would be considered tainted and unusable, so the hot steel was dumped into a slag pile and left to harden. When the steel mill was shuttered and about to be raised to make room for the Highmark Stadium, the pile of slag had to be moved, and the tainted steel was chipped away. Some believe that this disturbed the spirits trapped within. Without explanation, those working at the site would hear the anguished cries for help, screams of torture, or sinister laughter manifesting from thin air. Some steel mill tragedies are more widely known than others. Poems and folklore grew out of stories about men like Joe Majorak and Jim Grabowski, both of whom were incinerated in steel. Joe has been seen as a guardian angel for the men, even manifested himself to physically save their lives. If you'd like to find out more about Jim and Joe, I encourage you to venture over to Highmark Stadium. Of course, it's better late at night when the lights are off and the shadows are long. You'll hear a certain clanking sound. The hair on your arms will stand up. You might even get a whiff of fresh, molten steel. And that's when you'll know that the ghosts of Jim Grabowski and Joe Majorak are around. Ladies and gentlemen, the next time you're in a deep sleep and suddenly awaken, you're not sure why. The next time you dangle your feet in the river and something brushes against it. The next time you've got a feeling somebody is watching you and there's nobody there. Remember the stories of the haunted Three Rivers and the tales that you were told. While there's more than likely nothing to worry about, there's a small chance that a ghost, a spirit, or a beast of the deep are just letting you know that they are there. But ladies and gentlemen, I have been Ron Zombie, your host this evening, and I do gratefully accept gratuitous gratitude in any form you might find appropriate or inappropriate. And I look forward to greeting you as you disembark the boat. Thank you for joining us on the Gateway Clipper Fleet Three Rivers Queen. We hope you've had a horrifying experience. We wish never to see you again.
getting a little chilly, huh?